So I just got done defending a pretty high-profile case that I think most of the world knows about. And a lot of folks have been asking a lot of questions, and usually I don't talk about the cases, but in this situation, given the negative attention and the vitriol and the racist threats and the death messages that myself and my family, I thought I'd address some things. And one of the biggest ones people have asked me is, why would you take on this representation? Now, first, I've been practicing law for 25 years. Here recently and shortly, and actually throughout that entire time, I've represented 3 African American males who are accused of raping a little white girl. I have represented an individual who was accused of killing a person, folding his body and sticking him in an abandoned building in Florence, South Carolina. I represented a young lady who was accused of killing and drowning her newborn baby. I have represented countless individuals who have been accused of criminal sexual conduct, countless individuals who have been accused of child pornography. Represent an individual in Florence who was accused of murder, killing his rival along with his wife, who was also in the car. So there have been countless individuals who I've represented in the past, and so when someone says, why did you take this case? I don't judge. God judges. If you pick and choose who are you going to judge in your cases, it makes you ineffective of what you're doing. And so people say, why this case? Well, why not any of those ones with the outrage that has come forth? As criminal defense attorneys, we represent the Constitution, we represent individuals. And so when people say comments to me, and I've heard a lot of them, like, you didn't have to take this one. Well, I don't have to pay my mortgage either, but if you don't, they end up taking that from you. When the individual came to me and requested representation, that's the second thing. Oh, you're just a token. You were just put on the team because you're black. I'm pretty fucking good at what I do, and I find insult to that for someone who would just say the only reason somebody would ask me for representation is because I'm black. If you check and see the things that I do, I am very damn good at what I do, and I'm a very good lawyer. And I will not apologize for being somebody when someone needs, they contact and want a good lawyer. And the assumption is, which I hate, when someone says they want the best lawyer, by saying that you're saying the best lawyer can't be African American. That's disappointing on our parts. As far as the legal defense, when a person comes to us and says the following sentence, look, a gun was pointed at my son, I thought he was going to die, so I fired and shot. That was the legal defense. There was nothing creative, there was nothing tricky, there was nothing fancy. That was the legal defense. Nothing was hidden. I don't want people to say there was all this great stuff. That was the legal defense. This was presented to a jury of 12 individuals, 7 of which were minorities, who heard that legal defense and said, yeah, that makes sense. I didn't create those facts. I'm also hearing, finally, probably most importantly, that that people are saying we need to boycott Sean Kent. I'm not fucking Target. I'm not TJ Maxx. You're going to boycott me, and then someone says we're going to boycott him and we're going to take our problems to a white lawyer. Okay, yeah, that'll show me that we don't need him. Well, enjoy jail, enjoy prison, boycott me if you will, but I will constantly and always fight for what's right. People sending the messages, and there have been some there have been some creative messages. I guess the number one is that you have no eyebrows and stuff like that, which I know is true. So there have been some very creative messages, but there have also been some insulting ones, and there's been a lot of people who have requested phone calls, and I've talked to them. If somebody sends me a message and it's nice and polite and say, I just disagree with what you do, I've picked up the phone and I've talked to them, because I do think a system works better if you have an actual intelligent conversation. I do think there are problems with the way, and let me make this clear. The state of South Carolina did everything that they needed to do in this case. They tried their damnedest to present the case that they wanted to present. There's some very good lawyers in that office who I respect tremendously, and I know they're getting a lot of hate also, which I think is unfair, because they do what they have to do, as do we, and that's what makes the system work. If we do not fight for everybody equally, then the system fails and stops to work. I hate it, and I hate it for the young man's family. I hate it for Cyrus's family. I hate it that a young man died. I 100% do. Prosecutor said some stuff that there's a lot of things he is not going to be able to experience in but I do. It saddens me. It saddens me that a young life has been snuffed out entirely too early, and I think whether people believe it or not, the defendant would agree with that. He felt that he was in a situation that something had to be done or his son would be dead now. That's his position. People disagree with it, but that's his position. And a 12-member jury heard that position and said the same. So again, people who are telling me, I'm getting a lot of the last one. I can't believe you defended that racist, you fucking coon. Racist, you fucking, and you rat. And I finally figured out what those little emojis are that you're putting on my page. I guess that's supposed to be a coon. You're a sellout, you're a racist. And I'm just like, am I a sellout by showing the world that, you know what? I'm really good at what I do, and I'm going to fight like crazy for you or for anyone else. And so all of the threat messages and all the other situations, I hope down the road, if you need a lawyer, someone is there for you, and you get a really damn good lawyer, the best one you can be. And I hope someday we get to the point in our society where we say the best lawyers in the world have to be white and not necessarily black or people of color. We start to realize that good lawyers come in all shapes, sizes, and colors. And this is the task that we have chosen. This is the job we have chosen. This is the obligation that we have taken on, and this is one that I'll take on. I hate it though. I hate the hate, and I hate the fact that we cannot look past and realize that sometimes people can be good lawyers and still good people. So maybe we'll do a live if anyone thinks that's necessary. And by the way, put your hate comments. Tell me how much of a piece of shit I am.
All right, I'll leave it there. What's up, family? So, a 14-year-old boy is dead. A store owner just walked out of the courtroom, a free man, and right now the internet is on fire. People are angry. People are confused. A lot of people are saying the system failed. Now, I'm not here to tell you what to think, but I am going to break this down the right way because, quote unquote, not guilty and quote unquote right are not the same thing, and we need to talk about that. And we're going to look at what the jury actually heard and what the law actually says and what common sense tell us about all of it. So hit the like button, share the video, subscribe to the channel. Check this out. But let's start with the facts before we get into the feelings because this case has a lot of emotion wrapped around it. And the emotion is making it hard for people to see what actually went down. Rick Chow is a convenience store owner in South Carolina. A 14-year-old named Cyrus Carmack-Belton walked into that store, and what the surveillance footage showed is important. Cyrus came in with an empty backpack on his back, no money found on him, and a loaded firearm on his person. Now, the store had a policy where customers with backpacks were asked to leave them at the front, which tells you something about what the store dealt with on a regular basis. Cyrus went to the back of the store near the water bottles. He picked some up. He put them back. He never left the store with anything. Let me be clear about that. The water stayed. So at the moment he walked out the door, no theft had been completed. But here's where the situation changes. Chow and his son came out of that store after Cyrus. They chased him into the street. During that chase, Chow's son shouted that the teenager had a gun. Rick Chow fired his weapon and hit Cyrus in the back. A 9mm pistol was later found near the boy's body after the shooting. Now, the prosecution looked at all of that and argued this was an unjustified killing, that you cannot chase a child out of your store and into the street and then claim self-defense when things turn deadly. Their position was that Chow created a confrontation, and a person who creates a confrontation doesn't get to hide behind self-defense. After it goes wrong, the defense looked at the same set of facts and argued something different, that when Chow's son announced the teenager was armed, Rick Chow had a genuine, reasonable belief that his son's life was in danger, and he reacted to stop a threat. Two completely different interpretations of the same footage, the same chase, and the same outcome. And that right there is exactly why this case went to a jury in the first place. Now that we know what happened, let's talk about what that jury was actually asked to decide, because this is where a lot of people get confused about how the law works.
Put down your backpack. Backpack needs to put on the ice cream chest. Yep.
That was the footage. All right. So this was him before the night that he got murdered. This was him holding a gun on Instagram. All right. So here's where a lot of people are getting tripped up. And I want to walk through this slowly because it matters. In South Carolina, self-defense law comes down to one central question. Did the person have a reasonable fear that they or someone else was about to be killed or seriously hurt? Not a guaranteed fear, not a proven fear, a reasonable one. And that word reasonable is doing a lot of heavy lifting in this case because the entire trial came down to rather 12 people in that jury box believe Rick Chow had reason to fear for his son's life in that moment. But here's the part that people are missing when they watch the verdict and get angry. The burden of proof in a criminal trial doesn't sit on the defendant, it sits on the state. The prosecution had to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this was not self-defense, not the other way around. Child didn't have to prove he was innocent. The state had to prove he was guilty. And when you throw a loaded firearm into the picture, a gun found right near the body, the state's job gets a lot harder because now there's a physical reason to believe the fear was real, which is why I'm showing you the picture of him holding a gun before he went into that store the night he got murdered. So there you have it. 7 black jurors sat on the panel, not 1 or 2, 7, and then it came back anonymous, not guilty. Now, I know some people online immediately called the defense attorney a sellout. As you guys saw, Sean Kent, which was the first clip I played at the beginning of this video. He's a black attorney with over 25 years of experience, you heard him say. He's represented people from every background imaginable, people accused of serious crimes, people nobody wanted to touch. His answer to why did you take this case was simple. That's what defense attorneys do. They represent the Constitution and the individual. When you start picking and choosing who deserves a defense based on race, you don't have a legal system anymore. You have a mob. And if you wouldn't be okay with a white attorney refusing to defend a white client because of race, you can't be okay with a black attorney being called a traitor for doing his job. That's what Sean Kent was basically saying in the first clip. Now, here's the moment that I think shifted this trial more than anything else. The investigator took the stand, and the defense attorney asked him a direct question. He said, "Is it normal to walk into a store with no money, an empty backpack, and a loaded gun with a round in the chamber?" The investigator fumbled. He said, "It depends on who you are and what your normal is." And the attorney pressed again, "Would you personally do that?" The investigator backed off. And right there in that exchange, the prosecution's case started to crack. Because when the state's own witness can't clearly say that behavior was suspicious, the jury starts questioning everything else the state told them. That created reasonable doubt. And reasonable doubt is all the defense needed. So to be clear, not guilty means the state didn't meet its burden. Nothing more, nothing less. So now I want to show you guys The next clip.
So this young man went into the store with no money, an empty book bag, and a loaded firearm, and you're telling this jury there was nothing suspicious about that?
Well, we don't know they didn't have any money on him at all. There was no money found on him.
Again, my question was, you're telling this jury there's nothing suspicious about that?
Absolutely not.
And that is normal, and that happens.
It depends on who you are, what your normal is.
I'm asking you as the investigator.
But I can't speak on behalf of him. It's okay. I would probably do the same thing. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
You would go into a business with an empty book bag, a loaded firearm, with a bullet in the chamber, with no money in your pocket?
No, you asked me about the money.
Okay, I guess what happened is, officer, if you'll allow me to ask my question, I promise you I'll give you opportunity to answer. If you simply allow me to finish the question, I'll give you as much time as you want. Is that a fair statement?
Fair.
So as I was saying, what you said to this jury right now is you probably would have done the same thing. And my question was, as in going into a business with an empty book bag and a firearm, pick water in and out of a cooler with no finances or no money on you to pay for it. That's something that you would have done, is what your testimony was?
To that question, no.
Okay. And it's your testimony that that behavior that I just described was nothing that caused you any concern whatsoever in watching the videos and rewatching them?
Well, that was determined or found out after the fact, as far as the book bag being empty and him having a firearm.
Well, officer, when we talk about investigation, one of the things we talked about is we investigate the entire thing, the totality of the circumstances. We don't piecemeal investigation, do we?
We do not.
And so we investigate the totality of the circumstance. So are you telling me you did not investigate the totality?
We did, but go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
But you asked about the store. At the time he was in the store, there was no indication that he had a firearm, that the book bag was empty, and that he had no money. No one knew that.
There you have it, right? So to be clear, like I said, not guilty means the state didn't meet its burden, nothing more, nothing less. It doesn't mean the situation was handled well. It doesn't mean a 14-year-old deserved to die. It doesn't mean Rick Chow made the right call when he ran out of the store. The law gave a verdict. Common sense still has questions. Now let's zoom out, because this case didn't exist in a vacuum. And if we only look at what happened inside that store and in the street, we're going to miss the bigger picture that actually explains why so many people are this angry right now. Rick Chow called the police over 200 times. 200 times. And think about what that number actually means for a second, because that's not a man who woke up one morning looking for trouble. That's a business owner who spent years watching his store get picked apart, feeling like the system wasn't protecting him and trying to handle it through proper channels over and over again. He also had prior incidents at that store, a 2018 shooting that was investigated and ruled self-defense, and an earlier confrontation that was similarly cleared. And both of those situations involved people who stole from him and then turned the confrontation physical. So when people paint him as someone who was just looking for an excuse, they're leaving out the full picture of what that man had been living with on a daily basis. And I want you guys to see that clip as well.
Owner has a history of incidents involving customers, including a shooting in 2018, which was deemed self-defense and for which Chow was not charged.
I did a little digging just to get some background that the jury did not hear, nor did the public, okay? According to the Sheriff Department, Chow has called the Sheriff Department at least 200 times. Specifically back in 2015, May to be exact, Chow confronted a woman who grabbed 2 cases of Bud Light and boiled peanuts. She placed the boiled peanuts and the Bud Light inside of her purse and then left. The two had a confrontation outside of the store. Chow states that the lady allegedly threatened to harm him, so he pulls out his weapon and decides to shoot at the car 6 times. Now, no one was injured in this situation, but it was documented. Now, this incident is a little bit more serious. Back in 2018, in October to be exact, a man came into the store, allegedly stole some oven cleaner. He placed the oven cleaner in his pants. Chow stated that the man assaulted him, so as a result, Chow pulled out his weapon and he shot the man in his leg. Now, the man ended up pleading guilty to shoplifting. Chow was not charged in this incident, nor the incident with the lady who allegedly stole the peanuts. Neither one. To be clear, I do not practice in South Carolina. I don't know the laws of South Carolina. I practice in Georgia. But based on what I just reported, I can see why Chow probably did not want to take the stand. But These incidents demonstrate a pattern of aggression, a pattern on someone who's fixated on trying to catch his customers stealing and then calling the police after there is an altercation. So I'm just curious and still wondering, if the state knew about this and there were over 200 calls to this store, then why wasn't some of these incidents brought up during trial? He could have called, the state could have called these witnesses, they could have called the police officers. And I'm wondering, I didn't see it in trial, I didn't see it in the motions hearing. I didn't see them arguing a similar motion. Again, I don't practice in South Carolina. I'm just asking these questions out loud because you guys have stated that there were previous incidents, and I have at least 2.
So there you have it, right? To be fair, the frustration is real because nobody should have to run a business like that, like it's a combat zone. Nobody should have to wonder every single day whether today is the day someone decides to hurt them or their family over merchandise. And that is a legitimate pressure that small business owners in high crime areas carry. And we can't pretend it doesn't exist just because it's uncomfortable to say. But here's where it doesn't add up. Chasing someone into the street is a choice. In the moment you leave a building, the dynamic changes because you are no longer defending your property. You're now pursuing a person. And the law, in most cases, does not give you the same protection when you are the one doing the chasing. And that's the piece that the community is rightfully angry about. Because the question isn't just whether Child feared for his son, it's rather that fear would have existed at all if they stayed inside and called the police. Now, while all of this was playing out, while the verdict was coming down, while a family was grieving, while people were out in the streets, these were people online with phones and followings and audiences who were using this moment to advertise that they were ready to go back doing what they call ignorant stuff. And one person allegedly already on probation online talking about being on site. I'm not going to show that, but in plain terms, mean ready to retaliate. And the crowd wasn't calling him out. So you have the community angry, outraged. You see this woman basically using Rick Chow history of protecting his business, let alone his family that runs the business he put his blood, sweat, and tears in, where individuals can constantly keep stealing, committing a crime in self-defense in South Carolina, like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, is a law that is allowed. But I need you to sit with that for a second, because we cannot have an honest conversation about the system failing us if we're not willing to be honest about the ways we fail ourselves. And you can't spend one breath saying black men are over incarcerated and then spend the next breath publicly announcing that you're willing to go back to prison over a verdict. When you have a lot of people willing to basically now dox Rick Chow business, convenience store connected to a gas station, because the two things cannot coexist. That is not resistance. That is not accountability. That is handing the system exactly what it needs to justify the next set of numbers. And if you want to be honest, it quite justifies Rick Chow's quote unquote aggression, as she put it, when it's self-defense to protect his family and him who run the store, his wife and his son. And the same influencers who were framing this as proof that Asian people hate black people, this is what they're saying online, critics, the same ones pushing the narrative that this was purely a racial execution. Where were those voices when the real breakdowns in this case happened? Where were they when a 14-year-old was out in the world with a round in a chamber instead of being somewhere safe? Where were they when a community that has to live with this outcome was already under pressure from years of theft, tension, and distrust between neighbors? The outrage showed up after the verdict, but the conversation about what leads young people into these situations in the first place never really got loud enough to matter. And then the media got a hold of it, and some people turned this into a pure race story, is my point. But 7 black jurors, a diverse cross section of that community, heard the same evidence and came back unanimous. And we have to sit with that, because we can disagree with the verdict, but we can't pretend the jury didn't look like the community to individuals who had concerns of the jury having black jurors on there that was unanimous at one point. And to be fair, I mean it sincerely, community grief is real. People aren't just angry about a verdict. They're angry about a feeling that has been building for years, a feeling that their sons and brothers are disposable, that the bar for using deadly force around them is lower than it would be anywhere else. And that feeling doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from history, and it comes from real experiences. And we have to acknowledge that, honestly. because dismissing the grief doesn't help anybody heal, but acknowledging the grief and validating every argument made in response are two different things. And you can understand why people are hurting and still say the jury, 7 black men and women from that same community, heard everything and came back unanimous. And you can hold both of those things at the same time without it being a contradiction, because that's what grown, honest conversation actually looks like when we're willing to have it. When communities feel like the legal system doesn't protect them, trust the roads, as I always say, and that breakdown costs everyone, not just one side. And what I keep coming back to is that the situations that end up in courtrooms don't start in courtrooms. They start in the choices made long before anyone calls the police, long before anyone pulls a trigger, long before a family has to sit in the front row and wait on 12 strangers to decide what justice looks like. And that's where the real world is. So I want you guys to check out this last clip in regards of the matter.
Black community is back on hating Asian people after all the crimes they commit. They say that Asian people hate black people because of what happened with Mr. Chow's incident, found not guilty for unaliving a 14-year-old teenager. Do you guys remember this piece of Cordell Gooseby? The mother killed a pregnant woman, shot her the up in a Tesla when she was pregnant. The Asian people go start saying, I want to shoot every black person there is? No, we didn't do anything about it, so shut the up. And another Anton Watson, he killed an 84-year-old grandpa. He drop kicked him on property and the guy's dead. And guess what? Not guilty.
So this is a man of Asian descent, and Rick Chow, I believe, is Asian descent in his family. Basically holding the black community accountable because of the outrage and basically wanting to cause commotion at Rick Chow's business for him being free, and the community feel like he shouldn't be free. And he's like, hold up. Well, basically, you are trying to say that Rick Chow is bad, but what about the black crime that's done towards the Asian community, but the Asian community didn't retaliate and basically want to send death threats and things like that? Either way you put this, it's hard for everyone, but going against each other instead of unifying and actually fixing the communities. And it all starts with the household, right? So what do we actually walk away from all of this? Because if we don't pull a lesson out of something that's painful, then we're just watching a tragedy, moving on to the next one. That's not good enough. So the first lesson is that wisdom beats weapons every single time. So having a legal right to carry a firearm is not the same as having the wisdom to know when to use it. And the whole point of carrying is to protect yourself from danger you didn't choose and couldn't avoid, not to chase danger down the street and claim that it came for you. And the moment you run out of that store after somebody, you have made a decision. Now, rightfully so, him going into the store, the 14-year-old who unfortunately died in this situation, and going in there with no money now that we got the contacts, and supposedly stealing the water, and he's claimed he didn't have the water. I wasn't there, but as you guys saw the footage. And then what made the guilt more suspect was when they were in front of the store and he continued to walk out fast, even though they asked him to give the water, because Rick Chow and his family assumed that he stole a water bottle because he was in the fridge and you seen someone watching him behind him. He then took his bag, walked out the store, and then he started running when Rick Chow and his son went after him about the water. Now, I was on the side of Rick Chow was wrong when it came to them chasing him out the store, is my point, and going after him for the water. And up until I found out that the Carmack-Belton young man, the 14-year-old, had a gun. That's when it lost me. So the whole point is you can't steal people's stuff. And at the end of the day, you're going into someone's business with a firearm, which can be posed as a threat. And when it comes to self-defense, like I said, you don't have to wait for someone to sit there and actually cause harm to you. All it is beyond reasonable doubt to assume that it is. And that's where this 9mm gun really turned around the verdict, the same way it changed my perspective once I found out that 14-year-old had a 9mm gun with a bullet in the chamber. What are you supposed to think with a man with his whole family there running the business? So that decision carries consequences that no courtroom verdict can undo. right? If you carry, the highest form of responsibility you have is knowing when to stand down. The second lesson is that accountability has to cut both ways. And I mean that for everybody in this conversation. Rick Chow made the choice to pursue. That choice put him in the middle of a confrontation that didn't have to happen. That is worth saying plainly. But we also have to be honest. On the other side, a 14-year-old boy was walking around with a loaded firearm, around in the chamber, no money, and an empty bag. And some of the same voices online who are the loudest about injustice are also the ones cheering on a mindset that puts young people in those situations in the first place. You can't protest the outcome while celebrating the conditions that created it. Both things need to be said because both things are true. I'm trying to be objective as possible. The third lesson is the simplest one, and it never changes no matter how many times we have to say it. Property can be replaced, a life cannot. No bottle of water, no case of beer, no stolen merchandise of any kind is worth what this situation costs, but also you shouldn't steal from anybody's business. Not for the Carmack-Belton family, who lost their son, unfortunately. My heart goes out to them. Not for Rick Chow, who has to carry this for the rest of his life and what he endures with his store and his business with his family on a daily basis. And not for a community that has to sit in the grief and the tension and try to find some way forward. Self-defense laws exist to protect people from genuine threats they didn't invite. They were not written to cover a store owner running into the street to settle a shoplifting dispute at gunpoint. The law may not have drawn that line clearly enough in this case, but common sense does. And there's a verse in Proverbs chapter 17, verse 14 that says, starting a quarrel is like breaching a dam, so drop the matter before a dispute breaks out. In plain terms, that means the best move you ever make is the one that keeps the situation from becoming a situation at all. Once that dam breaks, you cannot put the water back. The confrontation is already in motion, and now everybody pays for it. The family, the neighborhood, the business, the community. Trust that takes years to rebuild. Nobody won here. Not Rick Chow, not the Carmack-Belton family, not the community watching it all play out. So the law gave us a verdict. Common sense and wisdom still have to give us a better path forward because the next situation is already out there waiting, unfortunately. So drop a comment, let me know what you think. Do you think self-defense laws need to be more clear, or was this the only verdict the jury could reach based on what they actually heard? Let's keep it real, keep it productive. Hit the like button, share the video, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications. Spread the peace, love, and positivity. Let the love supersede the hate. Catch you next one, family. Peace.